We're live.
Welcome to a joint hearing between House Education and House Ways and Means. The Senate has just passed H 955 amended less than an hour ago. And we are now sitting here for a presentation of comparison of a bill that passed the House and a bill that passed the Senate. Thanks to the work of our legislative council and our joint fiscal office. I think with that, we're going to turn it right over to the two of you to walk us through and just tell us which document would be the best one to be following.
Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel.
John Gray, Legislative Counsel.
So we put together very hastily for you a side-by-side, which I think is the best document to use of the House passed version and the Senate proposal of amendment. The Senate proposal of amendment just was passed by the Senate less than an hour ago. I've already found mistakes in this document. I haven't given Kirby an opportunity to add his sections. So this is really to benefit everyone and move us all along. And I will send a new draft to Daphne with some updates when I have a breather later. But none of the updates will be substantive except for one, which I will point out.
Great. And thank you for the extremely quick turnaround on this.
I've also sent Daphne two timelines. One is a very polished timeline that Kirby put together based on the Senate proposal of amendment. That is entitled, I think, Senate Floor Amendment Education Transformation Timeline. The other one is less pretty, more streamlined, and this was a document that I had created to kind of help me with just the merger process. And so use it as you see fit. It was passed out on the Senate floor. So the Senate has seen this. Okay. We have an hour, correct? Okay. So, and I know that, I know Ways and Means has joined you, and I know that I have walked through much of this with the Education Committee. But there have been some big changes since the last time we walked through the Senate's work. Do you all want me to talk about findings or let them speak for themselves?
I'll probably let them speak for themselves. And if we have time, we can come back to it.
Okay. So the Senate added some findings, and they added to your legislative intent. Do you want me to share my screen?
Oh, that'd be great.
All right.
Yes.
Are those findings the same we saw when we last did this with a Senate Finance?
The findings are, yes. Daphne, can I share?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Yes, the findings have not changed since the last time the Education Committee looked at this. The Senate did not touch the House's legislative intent subsections. You just had those two subsections. They've kept them. They're now subdivisions, and they added two pieces of actually three pieces of legislative intent. Do you want to go over that?
I don't think so.
Moving on to section 2, which is chapter 10 in title 16. This is the BOCES seesaw chapter. Again, I'm sorry, I should have started by orienting everyone. There's oh my goodness gracious. The header is not repeating on every page. That's going to bother me to no end. So left-hand side is House, right-hand side is Senate. In section 601, which is the policy section of the seesaw chapter, the Senate has added some language to the policy section that seesaw shall be used to ensure every middle and high school student has a genuine opportunity to participate fully in and to benefit from CTE. The Senate also added to each of the seesaws. We have 4 standalone career and technical education school districts that are independently governing school districts for the only thing they operate is their CTE centers. The Senate added 3 of those to the seesaw where they were geographically located. And in order to do that, Bless you. And we'll talk about the fourth, but in order to do that, they updated the definition of supervisory union just for chapter 10 to include, because remember, Seesaw's membership is at the SU level, not the school district level. So supervisory union for the purposes of Seesaw's includes supervisory districts and regional CTE school districts. And then they added, they've added, you can see they added I'll go back up, but they've added the Patricia A. Hannaford Regional Tech School District to the Champlain Valley South Seesaw. They've added the Southwest Regional Tech Center to the Southwest Seesaw. And they've added the Central Vermont Career Center to the Winooski Valley Seesaw. There is one more, and we will get to that in a minute.
Can I interrupt? I want to just go back because I'm sorry, I really have to ask a question about 601 policy. The added language, ensure every middle and high school student has a genuine opportunity to participate fully in.
That's current law. I borrowed it
Okay.
directly from the
Took it right out,
statute.
and it's both middle and high.
No, the middle and high is a policy choice.
Okay.
The participate fully and benefit from is current law.
Because currently we don't have middle school students fully participating. Just bringing it up. Thank you.
The other change that the Senate made to your Seesaw membership is that they flipped Grand Isle and Milton. So Grand Isle SU used to be part of the Chittenden Central Seesaw. It's now a part of the Champlain Valley North Seesaw. And Milton used to be part of the Champlain Valley North Seesaw, and it is now a part of the Chittenden Central Seesaw. And I had just left off Ludlow Mount Holly Unified Union School District as a member of the Two Rivers SU. So we caught that. And there were no other membership changes for Seesaws. The next change the Senate made in chapter 10, section 2. This is on page 10 of the side-by-side. This is the list of what needs to be in the bylaws, previously articles of agreement. The Senate added language to clarify that membership fees need to be allocated according to aggregate ADM of each member SU. And service fees need to be based on the amount of services actually provided to each SU as applicable. So if you don't use a service, then you would not be billed for a service. That was the only change to the bylaws. Powers of Seesaws. You'll remember that you all included at the very top of page 12, which the Senate has kept, some suggestions of what Seesaws can provide, including professional development, curriculum coordination, and transportation. And then you made a list of three topics that the Seesaws had to provide services in. The Senate has kept that, but they've added that those services only need to be provided when requested, because there was a concern that the Seesaw could be incurring costs having folks on staff for services that no one ever wanted. And the Senate has added that those services need to be provided when requested and when approved by the Seesaw board. The Senate had some discussion about what happens if it is one supervisory union or even one school district within a supervisory union that wants some very expensive service. Does it make sense for the Seesaw to do that? If you don't modify that shall in any way, then I think there is an argument that they have to. So we've built in that discretion that really services are going to be provided in the discretion of the Seesaw board, which is made up of the members themselves, right? And then the Senate also added to business and administrative services and subdivision 2 information technology, so IT services. No change to 605, no change to 606, no change to 607. The Senate added a brand new section to to chapter 10 and title 16, Seesaw membership adjustment proposal. This is like a very watered down charter change process. That concept will come back. We will come back to that process. But for now, the board of a member SU can propose to you all to change its membership according to this procedure. And that procedure would be that the supervisory union board would vote to withdraw from one seesaw and join another. And if a majority of the SU board members vote yes, then the two applicable seesaw boards would hold an advisory vote to say, yes, this sounds good to us, you leaving and joining. And then the SU that it wants to move is going to send a bunch of stuff to the Secretary of Education, including the minutes for all of the meetings where this was discussed, warnings, and published notices for any of these meetings, and minutes around the votes taken by both the Supervisory Union Board and the seesaw boards. And then the Secretary of Education is going to send all of that material to the General Assembly. And then you all will stick it on a wall and decide what to do with it. And the membership adjustment is only effective upon affirmative enactment of the proposal, either as proposed or as amended by you all. Any questions? Okay. The Senate also added, I'm on page 14, the Senate also added a new section 2A. You'll note we've been tried to, it's not perfect, embed the effective dates in each section. So this is an amendment to section 604 subsection A, which is the powers and duties of seesaws. This language should look very familiar. We just walked through it. The language we just walked through related to the services that seesaws have to provide would take effect on July 1, 2026. Section 2A takes effect on July 1, 2027. The difference here is that you'll notice that those suggested services that the House added, professional development, curriculum coordination, and transportation, are struck, and they are added to the list of services that have to be offered when requested and when approved by the seesaw. And then the Senate went one step further and also added facilities master planning to the list of services. So as of July 1, 2027, should this become law, that list of required when requested and when approved by the seesaw has grown to include these 7 services. I said we would come back to the 4th standalone CTE district, and here we are. The 4th standalone CTE district is the River Valley Technical Center school district, and it would be, geographically speaking, a member of the Vermont Learning Collaborative, which is your one existing BOCES. You do not want to monkey with the one existing BOCES because they are doing a whole lot of work for you in this bill. So this language says, talk amongst yourselves, figure out a way to petition the legislature using that process I just walked through to have the River Valley Technical Center become a member of VTLC. And prior to that, ELCT is required to offer services to the River Valley Technical Center as requested. So they're not going to be members, but they're not also going to be left out in the cold from provision of services. Section 3, the Senate made sections 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. The Senate made no difference to what the House passed. Same for section 12. This is all BOCES, seesaw. Section 13, we're now out of the seesaw reader assistance heading into the Union School District Exploration and Formation reader assistance heading. Section 13 is the study committee process. The Senate made significant changes here, both to the name of this process and to the timeline. So no longer are we referring to study committees. We are now referring to merger committees in the Senate proposal of amendment. There are a few places where I have explicitly kept the term study committee because we are referring to the current law study committee statute. Please don't point out that I have made a mistake. So merger committees, and the timeline is different. So you'll notice The Senate had everyone, or I'm sorry, the House had everyone getting going by the hiring of the facilitators on or before October 1st. The Senate has bumped that up to September 1st. The Senate has also added a requirement, I'm on page 16, that facilitators are required to assist merger committees with strength-based asset mapping and with developing and executing a public outreach plan that maximizes public engagement from the merger committee process.
Please jump in with a question over here in Ways and Means.
Please.
What is strength-based mapping, asset mapping?
Oh, I'm going to ask you to ask your chair that question.
So Emily, what is strength-based asset mapping?
This language did not come from me. However, strength-based asset mapping is a standard part of sort of a consultant's toolkit to do strategic planning. And it involves, instead of looking at, say, like a standard, what's that acronym with the
SWOT analysis.
Thank you. Instead of a SWOT analysis, which is more deficit-based, it is more of an asset-based way to say, like, what are the resources we have in front of us that we can use together to move forward? How was that for you, Beth?
Wonderful. And I should clarify that I asked Chair Kornheiser to speak to that, not because this was her idea, but because I have no idea what strength-based asset mapping was. Thank you very much. Okay, so the Senate added language that to get everyone ready, each school district, so we've hired facilitators on or before September 1st. The Senate has changed the timeline for the first meeting and for study committee assignments to be October 15th. So between September 1st and October 15th, by September 15th, each school district needs to have identified one current member of their board to participate in the merger committee. So they can't technically make an appointment yet because there's nothing to appoint them to yet, but they need to have at least identified that person. And then on or before October 15th, 2026, the facilitator needs to assign everyone. The Senate kept the criteria for assignment that the House passed. And the merger committee needs to hold its first meeting by October 15th. Now we're going to walk through kind of the work of that merger committee. So the Senate added language, well, you all had language that required each school district to participate in the merger committees. The Senate added that that participation needs to be in good faith, and that will tie into school construction later on. So remember that. The merger committee is required to follow to the processes and requirements of Chapter 11 as amended by this section. No change to the fact that the facilitator can work with folks to readjust merger committee membership as necessary. No change to the budget for the merger committee. You all are going to give them money, and the Senate made no changes other than updating the term study committee to merger committee. No changes to the appropriations for your merger committees and for your seesaws. So no change to the budget piece. And then you all passed language that required study committees to explore the feasibility of operating a regional, middle, or high school that offered residents access to CTE. And the Senate changed that to exploring the feasibility of providing for the education of its resident students through local elementary schools, central middle schools, and comprehensive regional high schools that provide each student with universal access to CTE. And then you all had two different reporting requirements. One reporting requirement for if a merger.
Hi, before we go to reporting requirements, just jumping in here.
I guess what, thank you. I guess what I'm seeing on C on the Senate side. They added through local elementary schools there.
Yes.
So is that mandating local elementary schools?
No, the merger committee shall explore the advisability and feasibility of a contemplated new unified union school district providing for the education of its resident students through the following forums. So you got to think about it.
But so local doesn't mean necessarily a particular town, it just means, well, what does that mean? What does it
Local
mean?
is, it's not defined.
Well, does this prevent 2 elementary schools or 3 elementary schools from combining?
No,
Why not? No, that's what it's, plain language there says.
Beth, did you hear that question?
I did, I'm sorry, I didn't.
I'm sorry. It was, why does it not?
The plain language is, you have to do it through these things, local elementary, central middle, and comprehensive regional high schools. So,
I think-
and access, I don't see that you could merge a local elementary school under this.
The highlighting language, I think, is perhaps throwing us. It's that the merger committee has to explore the advisability and feasibility. So is it possible for a new school district to provide for the education of its resident students through local elementary, central middle, and comprehensive regional high schools? The language in the bill stops short from saying, and if it is feasible, you have to do it. It just says you have to study it.
Thanks, Beth.
So the House passed version had 2 different reporting requirements. One, if a study committee said it was good to form a new union school district, and one if the study committee said it was not good to form a union school district. And so the Senate condensed that into 1 reporting requirement, regardless of the final recommendation. The report needs to include the names of the school districts, the strengths and challenges of the current structures of all of the participating school districts. What's the merger committee's final recommendation? Is it advisable or inadvisable to propose formation of the new union school district? An analysis of how the final recommendation will enable the merger committee member school districts to, under the foundation formula, maximize operational efficiencies, promote transparency and accountability, and encourage and support local decisions and actions that provide equal opportunities for an excellent education, all at a cost that parents, voters, and taxpayers value. And if the decision of the merger committee was not unanimous, an analysis of the minority view of the committee, including an analysis of how any school district participating in the merger committee but not recommended to be part of the new unified union school district will, under the foundation formula, provide excellent educational opportunities that allow students to achieve or exceed the state's EQS, maximize operational efficiencies that allow the district to meet or exceed the district quality standards, provide resident students with a genuine opportunity to participate fully and benefit from CTE, and provide special ed services. So that's what needs to be in the final report of the study committee. The Senate kept the language that kind of.
We have another question over here.
Where I see V, Roman numeral 1, V at the end of the sentence, just a second, now we got to find it. Oh, V, Roman numeral 1, provide excellent educational opportunities.
Yes, that is the
I
language
would
the
think you
Senate
want
chose.
equal educational opportunities.
That's a policy.
Excellent, they can just say, well, it's very excellent here, but it's not equal. Somebody else has 5 choices, they have 1 choice, that's not equal.
This language was a policy choice.
Yeah, I guess I just disagree with that policy there.
Thanks, Representative Bodie. Thank you, Beth.
Thank you.
The Senate kept the language about if you dissolve your study committee, you can go on to do whatever you want. And then the Senate added some language about specific to career and technical education. So it requires each merger committee to consult with area CTE directors and to document that consultation and any recommendations made by a CTE director in the final report. And the final report also has to include an analysis of how CTE access will be achieved for all students residing within the proposed new unified union school district. And if a merger committee's member school districts send their resident students to one of those 4 standalone CTE school districts, then the final report has to include an analysis of whether the applicable regional CTE school district should dissolve And the center that that school district is operating should then be absorbed and run by the new Union School District. And the report needs to include, that analysis needs to include the position of the regional CTE school district. Final reports from merger study committees in the Senate version are due on or before September 1st, 2027. And then the Senate added explicit language here that if a merger committee completes its work before September 1st, it doesn't have to wait for any of the drop dead deadlines that follow. It can move on to the next phase at any time. Facilitator, let's see, new language added by the Senate, requires the Agency of Education to make agency staff available to assist the facilitators by providing technical assistance to the merger committees as requested. I would argue that that is already current law in Chapter 11. And then throughout the merger committee process, facilitators and members of merger committees shall work together with their assigned school districts to endeavor to prevent any school district with an ADM of fewer than 750 students from becoming isolated by being left out of the formation of a new unified union school district. This concept of geographically isolating a school district or stranding a school district is going to come up several times in the rest of the Senate changes that we look at. Secretary review process, the Senate kept the process the same. It shortened the timeline that the secretary has from 6 to
Sorry.
So my question is, there's folks on geographic isolation, but is there anywhere in here that I'm missing that talks about locations such that, I'm withdrawing the question. Thank you.
Thanks, Beth.
Okay, so secretary's review has been shortened from 60 days to 30 days. And that all of the reviews need to be done by December 1st, 2027, or the study committee can, or the merger committee can bypass the secretary review and go straight to the state board, who has to issue their final report by December 15th, or their final findings by December 15th, 2027. You'll notice that's about 6 months different than the House passed version. The vote still happens as it does under current law, although I noticed in doing my work with the Senate that the current law does not require school districts that are identified as advisable to vote on a merger unless petitioned to do so by a certain number of citizens. And so we're notwithstanding that piece of law. All necessary and advisable districts have to hold a vote. And that vote needs to occur on or before March 7th, 2028. So town meeting day.
Question over here.
Okay, I should know, but remind me, the voting process. I thought the Senate was potentially going to make some changes here. It doesn't look like they did. They kept how it happens now under Chapter 11.
Correct.
So let's take some hypotheticals. I'm in CVSD and we've gone out and explored, and CVSD, Winooski, and South Burlington have done a wonderfully collaborative merger process. South Burlington, ultimately, is the voting commingled across those 3 districts? Is it?
By district.
Okay, could any one of those 3 districts, if South Burlington says, no, or is the whole merger
It
dead?
depends on if they have been identified as necessary or advisable. If all 3 of those districts are identified as necessary under both the House and the Senate version, as well as current law, which the House and the Senate version rely on, then the merger doesn't happen if any one of them say no. If one of them is identified as advisable and that advisable district says no, then the other 2 would form a union school district and the advisable district would remain whatever it is. So it depends, and the study committees, the merger committees themselves are the ones that identify who's necessary and advisable.
Merger committee of that.
So I'll give it, for example, let's say you were a merger study committee merging U32, Montpelier, Barry, Twinfield, and Northfield. You don't want to end up with a situation where Twinfield and Northfield say we're going to merge. So because what you really need is that core group in the middle. So therefore they would be necessary to make it happen, and the others could be deemed advisable. So
That's, but that,
so they could not throw off the merger of the necessaries.
If the study committee so decides.
That's right.
And remind me the votes in those instances, is it simple majority in each of the districts? Is it a 2/3? What's the threshold?
I don't believe it's 2/3, so it's a simple majority.
It is the school district vote, it's not a town vote, it's a school district.
It depends on the type
Depends
of
on the-
school district.
Depends on the type, right?
Right, but so if it was a union school district, the union school district is voting and there are no town lines, right? But if it's a town school district, then technically it would be a town voting. Yep,
But it's not a town,
it's not town by
it's not a
town.
town by town vote, it's a school district by school district.
So a school district with multiple towns would put people.
Be right.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so here is a section that I forgot to include. So I'm gonna stop sharing for a second so that I can share a different document. Sorry, we've now walked through section 13. That's that, and we'll, maybe actually, let's do this. This is the timeline that I just walked you through. So facilitators hired in September 1, 26. Study committee starts October 15th of 26. September 1 of 27, the study committee final reports are due. November, school boards complete their review. Secretary of Ed completes review. State board issues final findings by December 15th. So from mid-December through early March, you've got your election process happening, the warnings, the ballot preparation, all of that. Town meeting day of 28 would be the vote to form the union school districts. And under current law, and this neither version amends it in any way, the vote to elect initial members of those school boards happens at the exact same time. And the warning for all of those is all spelled out in current law. Then mid-April to mid-May, votes are certified. And there's a whole process specified in current law for how a new union school district is designated, depending on like when votes are certified, et cetera. Then you're gonna have to have an organizational meeting held within, and then there's a tie, everything is tied to the certification of the new school district. So depending on when that happens, then there's an organizational meeting that needs to be held, and that's all spelled out in current law, the business to be transacted there, including the warning, who posts the warning, all of it's already there. Transition period is also spelled out. This is when you've got the asset and the liability transfers. At the same time, you're gonna have your current school districts running parallel, taking care of the education for all the resident students of the new union school district as they normally would. And then on July 1, 2029, the new union school districts would become operational. All of the current school districts that voted to form the new union school district would cease to exist. And theoretically, your foundation formula would become effective if the contingencies had been met.
Yeah, if a merger is ready before town meeting day 2028, can they proceed or do they have to wait now until then?
Under the Senate version, the votes occur on March 7th, 2028. So no.
Not sooner.
There's a report, there's a separate section asking for the Secretary of State's office to give you all a report back early next year on the resources necessary for mail-in ballots for that election and the help that maybe local clerks may need, et cetera, to maximize voter turnout. Okay, so I did not, in hastily preparing this, I failed to include this new section that the Senate passed. Section 13A. So I'll update this and send Daphne a new one to put on the website. But section 13A, so we just walked through 13, that's the merger committee process. Section 13A is school district merger proposal, general assembly approval. This is essentially the charter change process for school districts that do not want to be isolated. They wanted to be part of a merger and it didn't happen for them. I think the term that it was being used and was used on the Senate floor today was they weren't picked for the kickball team. They want to be on the team. So, this is again a very watered down charter change process. So eligible district means a school district that is not successfully merged with a neighboring school district on or before July 1st, 2028, pursuant to section 13 of this act. So we're tying everything back to that process. So an eligible district may propose to the General Assembly to merge the school district with a union school district by majority vote of the legal voters of that district present and voting at any annual or special meeting, warned for that purpose in accordance with the following procedure. So the board of an eligible district may propose a plan to merge with a union district. Either the board proposes it, or they can be required to hold the vote if petitioned to do so by at least 5% of the voters. And an eligible school district can only propose a plan to merge with a unified union district that it is contiguous with. So the merger proposal has to include an analysis of the educational advantages and disadvantages of the merger, and then staying standalone, the financial advantages and disadvantages of merger, standalone, operational and financial viability of both options, and any other advantages and disadvantages. I'm just skimming this. Within 90 days following the vote.
Sorry, Beth, jumping in with a question.
A little earlier, it said they have to be contiguous. What if it's like the islands up in Grand Isle?
I'm not a visual learner, so I can't even picture that, to be quite honest with you. I don't know how to answer your question.
Okay, so there are islands up here, and they may decide they want to merge with a district where they send lots of their kids to high school. Or South Burlington. Could be South Burlington, not because they send a lot of South Burlington. Well, I don't understand why we would say.
I think that's a good question for the education committee to be sitting with. I don't think it's a question that Beth can answer.
Okay, well, that's good. I mean, thank you.
And remember, this process is only if you've already gone through a merger process and the folks you have wanted to join forces with have told you no, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
So that's a question
Hmm.
about that same topic.
Will you go closer to the mic though?
Yeah, Beth, I hope you can hear me. It's Carolyn. So, yeah, regarding that same scenario Carol was just talking about, where one of the towns in Grand Isle wants their children to be able to go to South Burlington or Colchester or somewhere they've already been attending. Somebody in the governor's office told me yesterday that there hadn't been any changes at all regarding school choice. So those schools all have school choice for high school because they don't have one since the Albert High School closed down about 20 years ago. And so wouldn't that remain the same that they have now? So those kids could go anywhere the parent chooses. That's the ability they have right now.
Yeah.
And if there wasn't any choice, any change, why wouldn't they stay the way they are?
What if they want?
This bill makes no changes to the town tuition program. It leaves whether or not how a school district is going to provide for the education of their resident students up to the study committees and then, or the merger committees, and then ultimately up to a vote of the electorate. It is entirely possible that new school districts are going to form that were made up of formerly non-operating districts, and they join forces with a giant operating district and they all become operating. It's also entirely possible that we go in the opposite direction. All of the law that enables those local decisions to be made stays in place. So we won't know how the education for each resident student in Vermont is going to be provided until we get the results of the votes of each of these merger committees, should they recommend forming a new union district.
Huh, so the governor's office was wrong. It has changed.
Well,
It needs a vote.
no, I don't know the context in which the question was asked to the governor's office, so I hesitate to say whether someone was right or wrong. But I don't think that this bill changes I don't think this bill requires any town or district in the state to provide for the education of its resident students in any specific way. It leaves that decision up to the voters.
Thank you.
Where were we? Okay, this is as someone told you no, thank you, and you can't take no for an answer. So you want to be part of a union school district. The board has done this analysis. The voters of the eligible school district, the one that's been left out, isolated district, now vote. The question's determined by Australian ballot, and it's going to be mailed to all of active voters not later than 43 days before the election. And then if the voters of the school district that wants to petition the legislature to force them to join another school district vote yes, that's a great idea, then the clerk of the school district sends the results to the Secretary of State, who records the voting results. And then submits that to the Secretary of Education. The Secretary of Education delivers those copies and the results to the General Assembly. And then the General Assembly either, along with like the minutes and the warnings and all of that from all of the meetings that happened related to this request. And then the merger proposal becomes effective upon your action. So very similar to a charter change. The school district is coming forward and saying, we were left out of this. We believe we belong with this school district. Please put us there. And you have that power under the Constitution to do that. I left that out of the side-by-side just because, no real reason. It was a mistake. I will add it.
Question.
Yep.
It goes just to the Secretary of Education, it doesn't go to the State Board of Ed and then.
No, and it's just, there's
Okay.
no recommendations. It's just a chain of information that you shared. Yep. Okay, back to the side-by-side. 13B, the Senate added a moratorium on a school district or a town's, it's really a town's ability to withdraw from a union school district through fiscal year 2035. So under current law, there's a whole provision for how a town can petition to withdraw from a union school district. You don't want to facilitate these mergers just to watch them fall apart in the next year, or maybe you do. Come see me for an amendment. But this bill says you can't do that, at least through fiscal year 2035, which essentially brings you through the transition years of the foundation formula. Yep. Here's that section 13C report is the report that you all will get back from the Secretary of State in consultation with school district clerks for all of the necessary funding and resources to support those town meeting day votes for union school district formation. Specifically, what are the resources needed to ensure ballots are mailed to all active voters? Section 14, guidance for merger committee groupings. I'm just going to say that the merger committee groupings themselves are very different, and the best way to see that is on a map. So I'm not even going to bother to walk through that. But in the lead-in language, the Senate did say that facilitators are required to include advisory representation on merger study committees from the 4 regional CTE districts, and they would be non-voting members of any merger committee that they serve on, and they are likely to serve on many merger committees because those 4 regional CTE centers are probably serving a lot more school districts. They're made up of many school districts, and the merger committees are likely to be smaller. So you're probably going to see their representation on a couple.
I've got some paper copies of the groupings for people to look at with the Senate laid over the House, and I'll pin it up here and leave a couple on my desk here for.
Do you have a link to that we can share?
I should.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
We don't have anything about the sort of qualifications or conflict of interest for facilitators, correct? That like,
They
they
have
have been a board member in that region in the last 3 years or a superintendent in that.
No, the language for, there's nothing about conflict of interest. The language for facilitators is just that. Trying to avoid scrolling. Shall have knowledge of and experience in the public education system. But no conflict of interest. Okay, so that takes us to section 15, merger committee results and analysis. This is the final facilitator report. It is now due instead of January 1, 2029, December 1st, 2028. It requires the facilitator to determine and identify any school district that is a bad faith participant in the merger committee process. And that is going to come into play for eligibility for school construction funding. The results of each merger committee, and then everything else that you all asked for. Section 16 is a report back to you all. The House passed language requiring recommendations for supervisory union boundary adjustments and seesaw boundary adjustments. The Senate passed language that just makes recommendations for seesaw boundary adjustments, because I also, in my work with the Senate, discovered that there is a statute that requires the State Board of Education in Chapter 11 to make supervisory union assignment when they are certifying essentially the creation of the union school district. So we're just gonna let that process play out. Section 16A is new from the Senate. I'm on page 28. It is a report back. So again, we're getting at that concept of isolated school districts. It's a report back to you all on or before November 1st of 29. The state board is reporting to you all with the name of any school district with an ADM of fewer than 750 students that is not successfully merged with a neighboring school district pursuant to this act. And if they do identify such a district, how to merge the district with neighboring larger school districts in order to promote financial and operational viability. So there's a process for school districts that were left out of a merger but want to be included. And this report should sweep those in. But it would also potentially identify school districts that don't want to be a part of a merger, and maybe they need to be. And so this is a report back to you all, and you can figure out what to do with those results. Section 17 is
Question here.
So it's a report back. It's not a mandate that then they will be.
just recommendations.
My understanding is that a vast majority of the smallest districts are non-operating at some or all grades. So I think that challenge of operating structures comes into play. It's certainly on display in Act 46. So, okay, thank you.
Section 17.
Wait, sorry.
Can I ask you a quick question before you move on? I noticed that some of the recommended merger groupings overlay multiple CSA groupings. How is that sorted out? Do they have to request reassignment when they're reassigned to a new CSA? Or is it automatic that the new merged district will be reassigned?
The section 16 is a report back to you all with recommendations for new seesaw boundary adjustments.
So, okay. So the agency and the state board will take care of that. Okay.
They will recommend to the General Assembly what those boundary adjustments should look like, and only you can affect them because those boundaries are set in statute.
Okay.
I also have a question about groupings. For a school district that has, that is a member of modified unified union school district, and the same town is also their own school district. But those two in these groupings are in two separate groupings.
That seems like a problem to me.
That seems like a problem to me too. So a town is in two separate groupings. Separate districts with separate groupings. Okay,
Yeah, if you could send me just like the specifics on that.
Well, it's probably others, I would just say it to this, but yes, I would.
I think that would be very problematic. But remember
It is here.
that section 14 is just ultimately recommendations.
Oh, I understand.
But yes, I think the goal with section 13, it's actually not the goal, it is the directive, is formation of a unified union school district, which would not allow for that
Exactly.
split. Okay. So section 17 is the appropriations for seesaws and merger committees. No substantive changes, just changing merger for study. And then do you want to talk about the
Sure.
whatever this is?
Yeah. So section 18 is the amendments to the effective date section of Act 73. It's where you'll find the effective date for the foundation formula and the accompanying tax changes. It's also where you find the contingencies for the foundation formula and those pieces. So the House construct had been effective, FY 31, so July 1, 2030, and that's been accelerated by a year to July 1, 2029. So this would have foundation formula rolling out in fiscal year 2030. And then the changes that you can see here relate to the contingencies. The easiest way to describe the process that the Senate did here is they tried to dramatically condense and increase the specificity of the contingencies if possible. So the new package that you have here from the Senate is first that the General Assembly has received 2 reports. So that's the foundation formula report under section 45A, that's already an existing contingency. And in place of the requirement that there be this clerk certification opportunity to study, they just have receipt of the facilitator report on the results of the merger committee process. In part, that was an attempt to address the possible problem of a rogue clerk preventing the rollout of the foundation formula. So the first 2 conditions have been collapsed into this receipt of these 2 reports. And then the Senate has taken a different approach to how to describe legislative enactment. On the House side, that was that legislation has been enacted that addresses a laundry list of items. And now the Senate has proposed language that gives a clearer trigger for meeting that contingency and also tries to tie some of the pieces to existing work being done. So you now have legislation has been enacted that expresses clear legislative intent to satisfy this condition by addressing each of the following components of the 45A report: CTE, special ed, sparsity measures, empirically supported secondary student weighting, and geographic cost differences, implementation of a pre-K funding mechanism, and measures for satisfying legacy collective bargaining agreements and capital indebtedness held by school districts. So squishing together the contingencies, creating a trigger for legislation related to, you would include in legislation an intent section that says, I'm trying to meet this contingency by addressing these components. And then otherwise making conforming changes to the timeline rollout.
Question.
I've read this like 5 times and I'm still trying to understand and make sure I understand from a non-lawyer perspective. Does it materially mean the same thing, or does it mean that the legislature could pass a bill that says we have the intent to fund CTE, and then the bill is about
You could do that.
weapons? Like
You could
it's,
do that.
that intent, we know intent is different than,
Yes.
like,
Yes.
this is only intent, this is not.
The way I think of it is you can satisfy, there's multiple ways I think you can try to satisfy this. So one that this is indicating, which is what you're getting at, is that you pass legislation with an intent section that says, I'm meeting the contingency of H 955 by addressing and then it's a bill about pesticides.
Right.
I think there would be lots of political constraints that could hinder that from happening. But yes, that is the idea, is that you could satisfy this with legislative intent. The other way you could satisfy it is by addressing all of these things, which would express the clear legislative intent to address all the things because you did do it. So the part of the issue that is trying to resolve is that on the House side, you could have sort of infinite questions as to whether you've met the contingencies, is trying to create a trigger that's easier to meet. But you're correct that technically, I think you could meet this without doing much work, but you would have you would face political constraints rather than legal constraints in that context, right? Like imagine trying to pass a bill that just has intent language to satisfy the education transformation bills and doesn't do anything to do it. But sounds like there would be a little constraint there. Right?
On that. Yeah, I had sort of a similar question. So the way I was interpreting the House passed language was that subsection D was sort of going to the substance of what this language calls on the legislature to enact, and then share Representative Brady's question around. So does that concept in the House passed version still exist in the Senate passed version, but just with that added requirement to also express clear legislative intent, or does that supplant the House?
It's not an
concept?
added requirement. It's what.
On the House passed language that required the Department of Tax to come up with the widget, the interactive education funding calculator, so that study committees or anyone really could figure out what their education payment would be under our current system versus under the foundation formula. The Senate removed that.
I'm gonna, sorry, jumping in for 1 second to just offer that my understanding is that there is language that's being added to the budget to have the widget be one of multiple duties from the Agency of Education that they'll do in consultation with the Department of Taxes.
Senate made no change to the pre-K language that you all passed.
Can we go up?
Yep.
Where are you?
I'm on page 32, G, I guess. Again, one I've read multiple times. Does this mean, check my understanding, that if we get the facilitator report about the foundation formula, we do all the merger committee reports, but that the report does not say we need a weight for high school, and therefore we do not enact a high school weight, the entire foundation formula is actually, this contingency could.
No, this is just for the additional, it's just for subsections B and C of section 823, which will be your new tuition section under the foundation formula.
Okay.
Subsections B and C were just allowing a receiving school, both public and independent, to charge up to 5% more of the base for high school students. And that was kind of in lieu of a weight for high school students. So it's just those two pieces. It's not the rest of the foundation formula.
What does it do again? Sorry, to the 5% above base?
It allows a receiving school to choose to charge a sending school district up to 5% of the base for each high school student that it receives on public tuition. But it has to meet certain criteria in order to be eligible to do that. And that's what I think B sets the up to 5%. And I think C spells out how you become eligible to do that. And both of those pieces are contingent on these contingencies taking effect. But they're completely separate. It's a completely separate subsection of the effective dates from the rest of the foundation formula.
But it's a sort of, if we do not go down the path of weights for secondary students, it's preserving a mechanism for schools to charge up to 5% over base for secondary.
It's only if the cost fact, the 45A report contains evidence that it does cost more to educate students, and you have not passed a weight.
And then I recollect in order to actually charge that additional amount, it requires a vote.
I think there's state board approval and you have authorized supplemental district spending for that purpose. Yes, there's several hurdles to jump through, yes. Okay, widget, no change to pre-K, no change to data collection, no change to special education funding. Section 24, the House passed language that would be contingently effective with the foundation formula that would prohibit a receiving school from charging tuition or fees on top of what they're getting from the sending school district. The Senate removed that language and replaced it with legislative intent language that takes effect now, well, July 1, 2026, but we're almost there. Under the foundation formula, no receiving school may charge individual families tuition in excess of the amount of tuition paid by a sending school district. So intent versus the statutory change. And the Senate language is specific to tuition and says nothing about fees. Section 24A, as passed by the House, was legislative intent language clarifying the effective date for Section 24, and the Senate removed that. No change to Union School District study committee budgets, rulemaking, some very small changes here. No change to the small sparse schools rulemaking, the interdistrict budgeting rulemaking. The Senate clarified that the interdistrict budgeting rules need to be in relation to the foundation formula, and that rulemaking is pushed out to December 31st, 2028. The House passed version had that as March 31st, 27, and added some clarity that the interdistrict budgeting needs to support budgeting in a way that will afford students opportunities and excellent education. No change to the rest of the rulemaking and forms piece. Do you want to talk about small and sparse schools?
Sure. So the change that you see here is related to in Act 73, and I suppose what you can see here on the House side, small school has a two-pronged piece. So right, one is you need to have been determined to be small by necessity, but there's also a numerical check. So you ask how many pupils, and in the House construct has fewer than 100 pupils in 2-year average enrollment. The approach that the Senate took here is to say, well, schools could be sized wildly differently depending on the number of grades that they offer. They thought that average grade size might be a better measure for what a small school is. It maintains the dual prongs of small by necessity, but instead of having fewer than 100 pupils in 2-year average enrollment, you now have an average grade size of fewer than 12 students. The technical piece I would note related to this is that count does not include pre-K, but they moved to this average grade size as the measure for small school.
The Senate, so we're in the very final pieces of my sections here and the Education Committee's work. The Senate removed your definitions. So the House passed language that amended Section 11 to add definitions for average class size, et cetera. The Senate struck that language and replaced it with its own language related to class size minimums. So what they did is they took the clock stoppage concept that was traveling in H931, the miscellaneous bill that you all passed, where you had class size minimums. Failure to comply with class size minimums couldn't be counted against you until either the rules were in effect or July 1, 2027, whatever came first. The Senate pulled that out of miscellaneous ed, plunked it into Section 29A of 955, kept the same "it shall not count against you" concept, but tied it to the foundation formula being effective. So the failure to comply with class size minimums cannot be counted against you until the foundation formula takes effect for both public schools in subsection B1, subdivision B1, and independent schools in subdivision B2. Independent schools would continue to remain eligible to receive public tuition if they fail to comply with class size minimums until the foundation formula is in effect, which is a similar concept to public schools. And then they added a new section 29B.
Before we go to that, and the one above, is it fair to characterize it as the class size minimums still exist in law because we passed them in Act 73? It's just that there is no enforcement until the foundation.
Yes, and I think that's fair, yes.
You had mentioned grade size minimums with small schools. Do any of those independent schools do we need to look at that language to include grade school minimum as it pertains to independent schools?
No, this is the language that John just walked through was related to a grant for public schools only.
Okay.
And this is a different concept.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I would say that maybe it's not fair that there's no enforcement mechanism. It's that nothing can be held against you to trigger the enforcement mechanism. So the enforcement mechanism is still on the books and active, but the clock hasn't started ticking yet. And then section 29B, the Senate added, which amends section 828, which is the statute that tells a school district who they can pay tuition to. Subdivision A2 is the list of things that an independent school needs to comply with in order to be eligible to receive public tuition. Act 73 added class size minimums to that list. The way I drafted it was that it swept in by just referring to subdivision 9 in its entirety. I swept in all of the enforcement processes for public schools. When you've asked the state board to come up with a separate process for independent schools. So all this amendment does is say that independent schools have to comply with class size minimums up through the numbers. It excludes the enforcement process. So this is what it looks like. If the internet will work, there we go. Okay, so here's class size minimums. This is a little bit of statutory construction that no one asked for. Subdivision 9 is class size minimums. If you say comply with class size 9, subdivision 9, that technically means compliance with subdivision A, B, and C underneath 9. But subdivision B and C are specific to public schools. Mm-hmm. You have asked for the state board to come up with a separate process for independent schools for the enforcement process. So now that amendment, section 29B says, independent schools, you have to comply with 9A, which is where the actual sizes live, not B and C.
Just to be clear, not that they won't have to comply, but not under this, the State Board of Ed is developing rules.
For enforcement.
For enforcement.
Which need to be substantially similar to the same opportunities offered to public schools. Yes.
It's not saying, oh, you don't have to really do it.
You have to follow your own process, correct?
Kate?
How does section 29B role for those kids who are going to a public school located in another state?
A public school located in another state does not have to comply with class size minimums. It's just listed as 828. It's just so in the list of a school district shall not pay the tuition of a student except to a public school located in another state. So no, there's no other qualifiers there. And that concludes my talking. Do you want me to keep sharing my screen?
If you don't mind.
Before your talking is concluded, we have more talking for you.
Hey Beth, it's Charlie Kimball. All the definitions that you had in that section, is that anywhere else in the bill or are all the definitions gone from the bill?
They're all gone.
Is it your opinion that they are satisfied somewhere else in statute without this definition section?
None of these terms are defined anywhere else.
Okay, thank you.
So we jump next to the school construction sections. Section 65, there's no change. And it's just your intent section for school construction. The simple way to explain the updates to section 66, the House provided staffing for AOE school construction division, but did not provide any FY27 immediate funding for those positions. We're going to attempt to get the rollout to happen as quickly as possible. The Senate included a $500,000 appropriation in FY27 for those positions, and then asked AOE to come back in FY28 with figures for permanent staffing of the division. Section 66A is a new section that appropriates $900,000 to the School Construction Aid Special Fund. This is for facilities master planning as part of the merger committee process. And so this would be exclusively available as part of that process. It's not a general grant for all kinds of facilities master plan. It's just for those purposes. And it had initially been $1 million, and then appropriations looked around, the amount of funding that was available and had to reduce by 100K. Section 67 is your grant of rulemaking authority to AOE for school construction. This delays from the House position to March 1st, 2028. That's your new deadline. That's the Senate's proposed deadline for rulemaking on school construction. And it tries to increase the specificity of the directives for building out prioritization and bonus incentives. So you'll see that the consolidating school governance structures is tied to that process under Section 13. Improving access for public school students to, and this is the call out that the Senate had been using, excellent educational opportunities, including CTE, shared special ed services for high needs students, and improved comprehensive curricular offerings. And then they added a new directive here. So in building up those prioritization and bonus incentives, reward school districts for remediating or eliminating health and safety issues. So 3 specific directives for building out those prioritization and bonus incentives. And then they dropped the requirement that the House had for rulemaking on the treatment of school districts' outstanding indebtedness. Part of their position came from, if you have the legacy debt aid section later in the bill and you're taking a position on what should be done, then why ask AOE to do rulemaking as to how it should be treated? Section 68 is your advisory board report on identifying school construction opportunities. The simple way to explain the Senate's changes, they were concerned essentially, I think, that the House task might be too large. Identify opportunities for the construction or renovation, provide a full siting study of each. Thought that this could be a quite lengthy list and that a full siting study for each might be too much to ask of this board that's relatively leanly staffed, right? So they took this down to identify 3 to 5 feasible opportunities for the construction or renovation of regional high schools. They have their call out. And then instead of a full final siting study, they said provide a preliminary siting study for each. It would still include that cost, location, other factors deemed relevant. I just thought that this might be more achievable. Section 68A is a new section. It's an intent section that says no state aid is going to be available under the school construction program until funding has been resolved and AOE has fully staffed its school construction division. Section 69 through 71, there are no changes. Those are statements of policy under the state aid program, AOE responsibilities, and advisory board responsibilities under the state aid for school construction program. Section 72 is the application process for state aid and the award of construction aid. And the pieces that you're going to see here, one is, you'll recall that one of the eligibility conditions for receiving aid is that the applicant achieve the level of proficiency in the district quality standards related to facilities management. I think there was some concern that this, because it's just a self-assessment, was maybe a bit weak. And so the change here is that the applicant demonstrates proficiency. So it would be a requirement in the application itself to draw out factors that show you can meet those standards. They've added another new eligibility condition related to PCBs. This is tied to another bill that's traveling in the Senate. I think it's H592 maybe. But it's that if the applicant school district is applying for school construction aid for a building that was constructed or renovated before 1980, they've completed that indoor air quality testing for PCBs. So just aligning with the approach that the Senate is taking elsewhere related to PCBs.
In the PCB bill, you'll see the exact same language when we get it back from the Senate.
The Senate has also taken a different approach to solving the sequencing problem that we've already talked about before, that how do you know what to bond for if you don't know your state aid package that could include state bonding support. In looking at the ballot language that goes out to districts to vote on the bonds, you're just voting an authorized amount. You're not actually issuing any bond at that point. So you can go out and authorize the bond. You just need to not issue the bond until you know the actual state aid available. So they preserved the existing sequencing in the program from Act 73. And that's what you see the clarity right here on at the final approval stage. One of the conditions that is that the district has authorized a bond And then what you see here now is just providing that clarity that provided that they shall not issue the bond until the secretary notifies the districts of its state bonding support. Okay, there are some meaningful changes to the award of construction aid section. So the range of aid available on the House side was 50 to 95%. 50 is the base amount. You get an additional 45% in bonus incentives to take you up to that 95%. The new range that you see is 30 to 75%. So they've maintained the same amount of bonus incentives, 45% available, but they've lowered the base amount to 30%. And then one of the biggest things you see here is the highlighted piece here. Bonus incentives are exclusively available to a certain set of school districts. And so this language that you see is projects for which the applicant is a consolidated school district are eligible for an additional bonus incentives up to that additional 45%. I'm going to skip past this CDAC to tell you what a consolidated school district is. It's either of the following. It's a school district that results from a merger identified as advisable in that merger committee final recommendations, or it's a school district with an ADM of at least 2,000 students. So they're essentially doing a check on size. Did you merge pursuant to the study committee process, or are you already at an ADM of 2,000? Only if you are one of these kinds of school districts would you be eligible to receive bonus incentives, meaning that if you are not one of these kinds of school districts, meaning that you both did not merge and are sub 2,000 ADM, your max award available under the program would be 30%. The other change that you see here is related to the recommendations related to bonding support available under the program. It's an annual recommendation under the Senate proposal, and instead of having that come directly from the treasurer, the Senate tasked CDAC with recommending. I don't think this is really that divergent from what the House had. It was the treasurer in consultation with CDAC, and the treasurer is on CDAC. So Section 73 is the same in both. That's your repeal of deferred maintenance, the prohibition on aid to projects resulting from significant deferred maintenance. Section 74, there are some meaningful changes. This is your legacy debt aid section. The first piece I would note is that under the House proposal that was effective July 1 of this summer, obviously there wasn't revenue for that. So the first change is this is now in the Senate construct contingently effective July 1, 2030. So with the remainder of the foundation formula. And then there are a few pieces. One is a callback to something that Beth noted a few times related to bad faith participant in that merger committee process. In the House proposal, it was 100% coverage of legacy debt aid for school construction, right? So what you have here is that a school district shall be eligible to receive legacy debt aid only if the district is not identified as a bad faith participant in the facilitator report. So default is that you would have this available, but if you are identified as such in that report, you would be kicked out of being able to receive this kind of aid. The other piece is instead of 100% coverage, it's 75% coverage. And it's not just debt that's incurred. The new condition is debt that is approved by the voters of the district related to facility construction and renovation, and for which construction has begun as of the end of 2025. So same cutoff date as the House, but instead of debt incurred by the end of that date, it is debt that has been approved and for which construction has begun. So someone might have started work but not taken on that debt. And then a conforming change to the maximum annual support available related to that 75% cap. Sections 75 through 77 are the same as in the House construct. Those are technical updates to your education payments. And that's section 77 is a big substantive one, but there's no change. It's the exclusion of school construction expenditures from the cap on supplemental district spending. Section 77A is tied a little bit to the sequencing piece that we talked about in the school construction section. There's existing law that spells out the ballot that goes out for the incurrence of debt. So this is what a school district would use when it's going to authorize debt. And the Senate has just tried to boost some of the language here. They cleaned up some outdated references to the old state aid program. And they've tried to provide some language to make the sequencing clearer. The way I would say this is that it adds disclaimer language to the ballot to advise voters that the annual debt service costs on school construction will be covered through your SDS tax and not subject to annual authorization. And they also provide information, not part of the ballot, but just information alongside at a hearing. Provide information on potential SDS tax rates to voters under different aid scenarios. So if they receive no aid, if they receive the minimum aid of 30%, or if they receive the maximum of 75, what kinds of tax rates would they be looking at? So they can have a sense of the potential future costs at the time that they authorize the debt. In any event, these would be estimates, and that's something that's noted in the ballot language you see in C, is that the board has to notify participants that those future SDS tax rates would vary annually based on a bunch of assumptions. But trying to make clear to voters that at the point they authorize a bond for school construction, there's more to come. You're going to be covering it through your supplemental district spending tax, and you're only going to authorize it once through supplemental district spending, trying to give some sense of the rates they might face. Section 8 is the ballot language for the supplemental district spending, so separate from the current debt. This is your authorization of supplemental district spending, and they've stuck with the House's approach, but tried to clean up some of the references, basically. So this is trying to maintain separation between ballots for regular annual supplemental district spending and one-time authorization of supplemental district spending to cover those ongoing annual debt service costs. So they just tweaked some of the lead-in language, but it's the same concept as the House was pursuing. The one new piece you might see in the ballot here is that in your regular annual supplemental district spending ballot, so not one for school construction, it does have new language included here to say, if you don't approve supplemental district spending, here's the rate you're going to face just to cover your annual debt service costs. Letting voters know that even if you vote down a regular supplemental district spending, you might still have an ongoing annual cost. Similarly, on the other side, your one-time authorization ballot for supplemental district spending of annual debt service costs for school construction.
John, sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
Representative Odie has a question.
Thank you. I mean, I really have to think about what you're saying here, but does this then force us? I might know the answers, but I'm curious about whether this forces a school district to spend its full equal opportunity payment and then forces them to spend above that for the bond, to repay the bond with supplemental district spending. I think probably not because of something you just said, but can you talk about that, please?
Yeah, so educational opportunity payment is not for the bond cost. And you would cover bond costs through supplemental district spending. That's why it is excluded from the cap on supplemental district spending.
Okay, then my next question is, when you're paying, when you're spending supplementally that way, will you have to pay for your bond repayment plus more because you are using supplemental district spending that will go into some fund?
I'm not sure I'm fully understanding, but you're.
I think with my big picture with Brigham, if you do supplemental district spending and you're able to do that, we said, well, if you have supplemental district spending, then you will have to spend some of what you have in the supplemental district spending, you can spend on a local level. And then some of it is going to have to go into a fund, and we don't know what we're going to do with that fund yet. Do you remember this?
I don't know, I was paying attention to the 4 people who walked in the question.
This is important.
Okay.
All right. So when we were talking about this a while ago, we said if, because of Brigham, if everyone got an equal opportunity payment, and then someone said, well, I'm going to have to do supplemental spending, you don't get to keep 100% of what you voted on the supplemental district spending. You have to share some of that.
Yes, but you.
And so so I'm wondering if it's for to repay a bond to build. Do you have to do that sharing?
There are 2 different supplemental districts
Okay.
spending. But John can explain that. I think your question is the construction supplemental district spending also taxed at different rates depending on the grand list strength of your community?
Yes.
John, did you hear that question?
Yeah, yes, and it is. It's raised in the ways that other supplemental district spending is raised. The thing where I started, I'm sorry to interrupt you, was in pointing out that in every case, a school district raises the full amount to cover its supplemental district spending. It's just that it always raises extra. So I thought the direction you were heading is that they might not have enough money to cover their annual debt service costs, but they would. It's just that extra is raised, which is used to buy down the following year tax rates. But it is raised in the way that supplemental district spending is typically raised, which is tied to the lowest taxing capacity district, the rate that would be required to raise it there.
There are many things about that I have concerns about, but one of the things is if we want to encourage people to consolidate and merge, but we then ask them to pay not just the price to do that, to build a new building, but in addition, have to pay more. Why would you make that choice? It is a question to ponder.
It is a question to ponder. Thank you.
Hey, John, while we have the mic open, on the legacy debt, if 75% is being taken over by essentially the education fund, in the discussion with the Senate, did they think of where the extra 25% was going to come from
Yeah,
to take down legacy debt?
the assumption was that it would be covered through supplemental district spending. So that's a good point, is that in this reduction from 100% coverage of legacy, you would now have, at least as contemplated here, some amount that's intended to be covered ongoing through supplemental district spending. And in those cases, presumably not subject to any authorization, because you've already authorized that indebtedness.
And folks, we don't need to figure this all out now. We just need to understand what the Senate did.
I'm just gonna say, if you have legacy debt and then you're subject to this with supplemental district spending, you didn't know going in how this was going to be working out. So other people who are building later would say, oh, well, I have to take all these things into account and I can do that and then make my decision. Those with legacy debt have that choice taken away from them.
Thanks.
And I.
Oh, yep. Representative Brannigan, you should move closer to the question. It is really hot.
Okay, so I think I understand it about the legacy debt. That is not included in the cap, right? Somewhere along, I heard that in your spending.
Yeah, so a couple of things there. So legacy debt aid itself would be something that the state extends, but I think the question you're asking about is if there's a portion remaining for the school district to cover after receiving any legacy debt aid, would that be subject to a cap? And the answer is no, that is not. That's excluded from your SDS cap.
Okay, okay, thank you. That clarifies it. And then what about this? That the AOE has to hire more personnel before they can allow any more construction? Did I mishear that, or what is that? I think that was back in Beth's testimony, or maybe in the beginning of yours.
Yeah, so there's intent language that spoke to how there simply wouldn't be state aid available under the program until a couple of conditions have been met. One is the really obvious one, which is that the funding source itself be resolved by you guys. And so whether you provide that condition or not, it has to be met. But the other was that the Agency of Education has fully operationalized its school construction division. And that's really just meant to be a practical point that until there is rulemaking and a division in place to review applications, even if you had funding available, there would be no reviewed applications because the work wouldn't be done. So that's just an intent section, but it's trying to give some indication of the kind of work that needs to be completed before any aid is going to go out to districts. And in part, the Senate, if I understand it, had included this intent language because there was some concern that if you had all of these school construction sections in the bill and didn't include some disclaimer that the money still isn't there, that school districts might be hanging their hat on the fact that come July 1 of this summer, they're suddenly going to come into a bunch of cash, which isn't what's proposed here.
We may need to pause here. We have a roll
Yeah.
call vote on the floor. What's our availability with all y'all?
I'm Sadly freely available.
Okay. We are already up to page 58 of 65,
Getting
so,
close.
We'll all head back after the roll call.
yeah.
Thank you very much.